Hey everyone, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where I get to sit down and have unscripted, deep, and meaningful conversations with other writers. Before I get to today's guests, I just want to make a special announcement that our first 3 courses are now available at my website, unboundwriter.com. So Unbound Writer is my company where we offer immersive coaching and writing retreats. I offer one-on-one coaching with clients, and we are now offering online classes. So these are just on-demand, go at your own pace online classes that can teach you all different aspects of the craft of writing and learning the publishing industry. So just go to unboundwriter.com and check that out. So today on the guest, I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. Today on the show, I had Erin Adams. So Erin is a novelist. Her debut novel, Jackal, came out in 2022 and highly acclaimed, received a lot of attention. And I met Erin. We did an online event together, and I don't quite remember what the event was. But I remember, so we met on this event through Zoom, and I subsequently asked her if she wanted to be on the podcast because she just seemed like an interesting person. So months later, we were able to have a conversation. But she's a trained actor as well as a writer. She's got 2 different master's degrees, so she's very arts focused. And she lives in New York City and was kind of explaining kind of her journey about, finishing up all her degrees and then trying to look for work, first looking for work, in the world of acting. So going on a lot of auditions, and she kind of got to the point where she realized that the passion wasn't there as much in acting as maybe it would be in writing. So she wrote what she thought was a short story and then expanded into a novella, and it ultimately became her first book, which sold very well and allowed her to have some breathing room with money issues for a while, which, as a writer, you can have all the passion in the world. It's still terrifically hard to make decent money doing it. And sometimes what you have to do is not focus so much on, I'm doing this for the money. You're doing it for the craft, and good things will happen if you're still finding the joy in doing that. So we discussed that at length. So we went into a big history of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where she's originally from, or at least has lived a decent amount before she moved to Manhattan. And this is where she set her first book, Jackal. And just the history of Johnstown is pretty crazy too, in terms of they had one of the largest natural disasters in U.S. history there, which ignorantly I didn't know anything about. So she explains that as well. But as she said, it's a very haunted city. So we had a very engaging conversation, and we made up a cool little story at the end. So I think you're going to like this one, folks. This is my conversation with Erin Adams. What's your tat? What's your ink on there?
It is a surreal lady with an afro of flowers. So there's her face, and then the flower makes her shoulder. Yeah.
How old were you when you got your first tattoo? Was that your only one?
It's my only one. Oh gosh, I got it. Dear Lord, how old was I? I mean, it was like I got it in, was it 2020?
Okay.
Yeah, it was 2020. It was lockdown. It was during lockdown, and this artist all this detail. I mean, she's an incredible artist, and I could usually never get in with her. And she was just like, the world's burning. Anybody want tattoos? And I'm like, me.
Totally. I got
so I got in with her.
This real detailed one was like January 2021. So everyone was still wearing masks. So it was like 5 hours of mask pain.
Yeah, it was the 2 of us in the entire studio. They were like doing one equipment at a time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They were probably struggling to, talk about, a business that, probably really went through some pain because you've got to be there. There's no Zooming a tattoo.
No.
So thanks for joining. So I met you, we did an event, an online event, and now I'm months ago. I don't quite remember what it
I
was.
don't even remember. It was cold, so it must have been in like the early spring.
Yeah, it was in the
Yeah.
early spring, and I'm like, oh, she seems kind of interesting. I wonder if she wants to talk to me.
Why not?
So thanks for making it happen. So where do you live? Where are you?
I'm in New York City.
Oh, where in the city do you live?
I'm in Manhattan. I'm on the Upper West Side.
Upper West Side. Were you at Thriller Fest at all?
No, because Thriller Fest was the exact same time as StokerCon this year. So
Oh,
I gotta go with the
okay.
Halloween people. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Where was StokerCon this year? Last year was in I'm in Colorado, so I went last year when it
Yeah.
was in Denver.
It was in San Diego.
Okay, okay. And that's I mean, so you think about thrillers and you think about horror, and it's there's not a huge line defining them, but pretty vastly different conferences, I'd say. How
Yeah.
was your time with it?
It's my favorite one. It's just so much fun. It's so great.
Now, are you would is Jackal, your book Jackal, is that considered um, you know, cutting the edge of horror at all, or not really?
Yeah, so it's like it is a very like solid 50-50 split between thriller and horror, I feel. It's like
Yeah.
it's right on that line.
Right. And like what defines like I because I've
And
been
like
told this
what
right.
defines horror? And I mean,
I
I actually know I have opinions, but
Right, but everyone has them, and
yeah.
ultimately it depends on how the publisher kind of markets it at the time.
Mhm.
Because I just write what appeals to me, and like I think this is an interesting story. I have no idea,
Mhm.
and then I'll be told, yeah, it's bordering or venturing into horror territory. I'm like, well, why? Like what makes it so horrific?
Mhm.
But and I kind of like that badge because I think I just read a review of somebody saying I read horror novels all the time, and this villain scared the shit out of me. I'm like, that's awesome. That makes me flush with pride. But I don't know what specifically is it that because I've killed all sorts of people in my books, but they haven't necessarily been called horror.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole thing about like the usage of violence and surprise and how there's like horror utilizes surprise in a way that I would argue thriller and mystery and suspense just really don't. And there's a certain amount of like shocking aspects to horror that a lot of mystery and thriller tends to veer away from, but like not all the time.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes horror can be very structurally like a mystery. I mean, I would
Right.
argue, yeah, Jackal is right. It's right. It's both. Like it's right in the middle. It kind of borrows from, and like you said, I just wrote the book that appealed to me, and then
Right.
people like put labels on it, and I'm like, all right, cool. Like,
Whatever you think is going to sell the most. I know
yeah.
because we have these conversations every now and then about like sex and violence in books, for example, and
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that both of those things need to be treated with great respect.
Yeah.
And so somebody could argue that horror would be like gratuitous violence, which I don't agree with at all. I don't think it's that at all. I think you could get into splatterpunk and stuff like that. We're sure
Yeah.
that's maybe the point. But I think I think both sex and violence are literary tools to be used when appropriate and when meaningful and when creating propulsion and meaning to your story. But otherwise, stay away from it. Like with anything else, like why do it if
Yeah.
it's not adding to your story? And so
Mhm.
then you're just writing and you're like, okay, I think this should happen now. And if it doesn't happen that often, something violent, when it does happen, it is shocking. And it maybe does therefore venture into horror territory. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? I'm
uh,
like, I know that I will not be solving that today. Like,
Not my problem. I just do what they tell me. Um, did you grow up in the city or in the Northeast?
I grew up a little all over the place. When I was growing up, I moved like every 3 to 4 years of my life because my mother had me uh she had me in her first year of medical school, which is
Oh,
insane to think
that
about.
is
So she
insane.
deferred
She didn't
for
have
a
enough going
year.
on.
Yeah, she's like also baby. So she
Oh
she
boy.
deferred for a year. They
Yeah.
let her, take a year off and like,
Well, that's good.
be a mom.
Right.
But so that meant that like I was like there's a lot of moving around that happens in that early start of medicine where it's like
Right. You
your
go where the
medical school.
opportunities are, where the
Yeah,
residencies are, where they'll have you. Yeah. Which
yeah.
is not guaranteed at all.
Yeah. So it's like, residency and then job placement. So I moved around a whole bunch, but the place that like I call home is Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's a little teeny tiny town in the Rust Belt.
Hmm.
It's where I set Jackal because it has an insane history. Like it's the site of, up until Hurricane Katrina, the largest like disaster in American history happened in Johnstown.
Hmm.
There was a
What,
flood. It's a lot. There's a lot.
what year was
um,
that?
the flood was in, I should still know this. I think it's
Like what, 18
1890.
something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was a river, obviously, that
Uh, it was a dam. Okay, I have to go into it. So
I got to know about the Johnstown flood.
flood. So the city itself is built in a valley. And so there is about 14 miles up said the mountain that makes one of the valleys is the South Fork Dam. And for years it was, a reservoir, and then it fell into different hands, and then it became like a resort for the one percenters who lived in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
And those one percenters, like the Fricks, the Carnegies, like, the Fords, people,
The Hineses.
yes, exactly. These like massive industries, vacationed at the South Fork Dam and really didn't take care of it that well. And there
You got to
was
take care of a dam. I think that's kind of rule number one.
especially when it's like, above a city, but whatever.
How is a dam
And
privately held, first of all? That's insane to me.
it's a lot. And so after like, a particularly rainy week, the middle of May, in the middle of the day, the dam burst and like let forth metric tons of water
Sure.
down the mountain. And then plus that, all the debris from the 14 miles that it had to go down the mountain and just literally crushed the town in the middle of the day.
And the idea of it going 14 miles is pretty hard to even like comprehend, like rushing water traveling that great of a distance, and it probably traveled at a crazy high rate of speed.
Oh, insane speeds. Like the town just got, it's pulverized. Like there's like so
Wow.
many, I mean, lots of documentation and stories of just
Like a
whole,
Pompeii. Yeah.
basically like whole streets and stuff being just wiped clean off the map. And it was a massive tragedy. It founded the peacetime Red Cross in the United States.
Huh.
And yeah, and so that's Johnstown. You walk into town and you're like, okay, something happened. It's haunted. It's so haunted.
Wow. So you grew up there, or you at
Yeah, I
least,
grew up there.
and you're like, well, I got to set a book here. This is like
hmm
it's too rich of an environment. Now, does that history play a role in your book?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Johnstown is a very like particular kind of Americana that kind of came to the forefront in 2016, coming back to the forefront again because what's old is new. And it came to the forefront in 2016 in a really big way with the election and everything.
Yeah.
It used to
Yeah.
be a bastion of like diehard working class Democrats and had a record number of Republicans register in like early 2016
Right.
and kind of, was one of the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak. Oh, that is a terrible one. In everything that happened.
Yeah. And is it still being looked at now as one of these kind of pivotal counties? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think to my recollection, Trump did like 3 victory tours there. Like,
No.
I'm assuming he's gonna, if he hasn't done, he will do another like shenanigans in Johnstown. It's because, it's this apex of Americana where it used to be a steel mill town. Everyone lost their jobs and the steel mill went bankrupt. People lost their pensions. It was a working class town that just totally got, it's part of the Rust Belt. It got totally overturned because of 1,000. It's like, pick your poison, whether it's the opioid crisis or
Right.
the lack of a bailout, or so all of that. And then plus it's just like super haunted. So all of that is in my hometown. So I wrote a book about it.
Right. And that's a very socioeconomically, demographically, culturally, a very different place than where you are now.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So that's got to be, do you still connect to Johnstown? I mean, I'm sure you still have friends there, family there, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's got to be very different than your life now, I would think, in terms of your life experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I go, my mom is still there. I go home to visit. I don't, what is regularly as an adult? I have no idea, but I
No,
see my mother
once a year is regularly as an adult.
as an adult. I'm like, what is that? But I see my mom pretty frequently, and I go back to town. I've been doing a lot of events in town since the launch of Jackal.
Yeah.
But I would say that, yeah, there's a disconnect also because the town is changing so fast. Like the town that I describe in Jackal, first off, it's been dramatized for fiction, and it's already totally different from what Johnstown is today. There's been like so many economic efforts. I think they're still like paying people to move there and move into these like beautifully renovated lofts downtown. Downtown is
Hmm.
totally night and day from when I grew up. Downtown was like
Hmm.
abandoned when I grew up, and now there's like coffee shops and bookstores and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
restaurants. Yeah.
And do you, I don't know how you treated Johnstown in your book. I'm sure you treated it with reverence and respect, but also, your memories of it. And like you said, you took some literary license. Did you get any pushback from the community about like, hey, how come you portrayed our town like this or anything like that?
Not that I know of. The main
You haven't
feedback
read all the
I've
Goodreads
gotten,
reviews?
no, the Goodreads is the bad place, and I stay away from it.
Yeah.
But mainly the feedback I've gotten is like you told the truth about our town, like you portrayed
Great.
things honestly, where it's like it's even-handed. There's characters who majorly advocate for small town living and what small town living can afford you, and the characters who have the opposite views, and it's very complicated, and that's kind of it's a big reason why I even attempted to write. I mean, I completed, but write the book is that I feel like so many portrayals at that time in like 2017, 2018 of the Rust Belt were so flat and
Yeah.
just not it, and like stereotypical. And I'm just like, this
Right.
this area of the country has been through a whole lot, and there's a lot of pain and a lot of heartache and a lot of just there's just a lot there. And so I
Yeah.
attempted to write my version of it, and so far people have been digging it.
Well, that's good. I mean, and it's,
Yeah.
sometimes I think what authors lose sight of is that your setting is as powerful a character
Oh,
as anything else is. And there's nothing less interesting than a one-dimensional quote unquote hero or villain. I love all my characters to be equally gray, equally morally, ambiguous, and your town should be as well. Your setting should
yeah.
not be idyllic, nor should it be a devastation.
Yeah.
It should have, beauty and the horror mixed in with it as well, because that's what makes it, first of all, it's real, to your point, and it's what makes
Yeah.
it interesting as well. And so did you did you study writing in school at all? Or are you like me where you just like, I'll just figure this shit out and fail a lot along the way?
The irony is I did study, yes, I studied writing, but I studied like different all the other different kinds of writing. I have my first degree is in playwriting, so I learned how to write plays in undergrad, and then my master's. I have two master's degrees, one in classical acting, and then the other master MFA is in dramatic writing, so writing for TV, film, and theater.
Right.
No prose writing, but here I am.
Well, so you obviously went into education and higher education with a real, arts focus.
Yes.
So you must have known at some age, you're like, I just want to do something in the arts. It sounds like.
Yeah. I just want to tell stories in whatever way I can do so that, can support me and like not drive me crazy would be great. So.
Yeah. Well, the supporting part's the challenge, right? And that's something
Yes.
that's very hard to wrap your head around at a younger age, of knowing like, all right, this is great, I'm learning all this, but what are the practical applications of being a playwright or being an author? Or, and you can kind of connect to it a little bit more when you think about writing for TV and film. But even that is like, it's a tough slog to to get in the door. Once you're in the door, maybe you can make
Yeah.
some. So did you have kind of that moment of like, all right, I've done all my degrees. Now what the hell do I do? I've got to eat.
I have to eat. Gosh, I mean, it kind of happened before the second degree. I was acting I've lived in New York for over a decade now, and I've been a professional actor almost the entire time. And I was like doing it. I was doing the thing that, they always tell you to do, where it's like, I had an agent. I was part of the unions. I was auditioning, getting callbacks. I was like doing the thing.
Like for
And
anything, like TV, film, plays,
yeah, all of
theater.
it,
Yeah.
all of it, TV,
Okay.
film, theater. And it was just like so deeply unfulfilling that I'm like, well, this is a problem. And I was also just, I can say that I was sick of being poor. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm tired of being poor.
I mean, is
This
that
a
what was
lot.
unfulfilling, or was it the idea? Because rejection
Everything.
is obviously unfulfilling, and
Yeah.
I know that well too. But also, were you feeling like I don't even like this as much as I thought maybe I would?
I mean, yeah, basically, it's like,
Yeah.
it's something similar. I would say that the parallel to writing would be like if you find yourself not wanting to do like your daily pages, like, that's when you're like, okay, something is
Right.
really, really
Consistently.
wrong.
Right.
Something
Right.
is wrong. Yeah. I mean, every so often, yes, sometimes I don't want to write either, but
Right, of course, because
like,
it's a job, and jobs
it's a
suck
job.
every now and then. But if
Yeah.
it sucks every day, then you
Day.
got to really question why you're doing it.
Yeah, for a long period of time. So that was happening. And I just turned back to writing as a way to like reclaim my artistry, to just feel a bit more like an artist again. Because when you're acting and you're not booking, you're professionally auditioning over and over and over and over
Right.
again.
You're not getting a chance to actually do
Do
your
the thing.
craft with
Yeah.
an end product in mind.
Yeah, you're just auditioning over and over. And there is, it's like you have to like auditioning. Like it's same. I would argue the same with blasphemy. How do you write books? I'm like, you really gotta like writing. You gotta like it a lot because that's what
Yeah.
you're gonna do.
Right.
But like basically turned back to writing and just started trying stuff and started to slowly knock on doors, and then suddenly the doors were like opening, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go into this room and we'll try the next room. And the next thing I knew, it's like through a series of, in hindsight, incredible events, I suddenly had a book deal, and that book deal like paid off my student loans and like
Yeah.
and could like sustain me in between the book one and book two of it all. And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, here we are. Let's just try this for now and see how it is. So
Well,
I
and
don't know if I really had that.
that's pretty
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah, no, and with something again, when I like look back at all the events that had to happen, I'm like, I feel like if I tried to do it, I
No,
would
you
have
can't.
failed massively. I couldn't
You
have
can't.
tried to do what I did. I just kind of
Yeah.
just kept
Totally.
one
I'm
step
firmly
at a
convinced,
time.
and this is,
Yeah.
and I coach this as well, that is like, don't think about all that stuff. Be aware of it, be understanding of how the publishing industry works and what role you play in it and what you have to do, but don't think about it otherwise. Because if you enjoy writing those pages most of the time and you're telling the story you want to tell, good things will eventually happen if you just stay with it, and if you're willing to embrace rejection, if you're willing to learn and understand, because if you look back and it's like, how can I replicate what Erin did? You can't. You can't at all, because it's all timing and it falls in front of the right people at the right time. So when you started writing this book, did you have that whole idea fleshed out in your mind, or you're just like, I'm going to pivot a little bit and I want to try writing a novel? Because that's no small task.
No, I had no plan whatsoever.
Yeah.
No plan, all vibes. Just started
Mhm.
writing what I thought was a short story. I'm like, oh no, it's longer. Maybe it's a novella. And for a long time I had like a novella, and then I finished it and I'm like, oh, this is a book. Like,
God damn it,
this is
it's a book.
big old chonky thing. And I'm just like, okay, well, now that I have this thing, let's like figure out how to get it
What do I do with it?
what do I do with it? Let's figure out what I can do with it. And yeah, that's just really, it really did just come together one step at a time. I did not plan anything. I paid dearly for not planning in revision. that got me.
Just how much there was.
Yeah, I had to restructure, which is not fun.
Yeah. But you can plan for that, because I will have, I've done this so many times now, but I'll have a book done, give it to my agent, get all of her feedback, and she's very detailed. And then it goes to the editor who buys the book. And then you get the editorial letter, which is always like, oh, can you add a subplot? You're like, what?
It's like somebody saying, like, can you add like a full bedroom and bathroom to like your house, but don't change it too much, but like add a bedroom. Right.
And don't hire anyone. Just do it yourself.
Just do it yourself.
Just watch some YouTube videos and figure that out. It's horrible, but it's also like it's all the mental aspect of it. Like you have to appreciate the fact, like, oh, thank you for telling me what needs to be done. And I agree that these are all great changes. It's going to take me 3 months to do it, but I'm excited for my book to be better. And it's not always the easiest attitude to have. Sometimes I've got to put that letter away for several days before I really kind of can get in the right mindset to look at it. But it's what happens.
Oh yeah, I let it rest. Like when you grill a piece of meat, I like print it out and I like leave it on my desk, and I'll just like visit every so often, like, hey, let's just take a look at it, make some notes, and then like when it's too much, I'm like, okay, now we're leaving, we're going away.
Right. Just, like, or then I'll always attack like the easy stuff first. Of like maybe my editor doesn't like one of the characters' names, and I'm like, great, I'll just do a find and replace. That took me 5 minutes. I'm making progress. But then it's like the subplot thing. I'm like, oh. And then some are easier than others. I've had books where it's been very light. Some, like my last book that came out, was months and months and months of revisions. It was a real struggle, but that kind of, for me, is what happens when I don't plot. So when you just let it all go out, you're probably going to have more issues. Maybe not, but it's the only way I know how to write.
Yeah. Oh, I'm like in the middle now, because I did my, plotting and pantsing. I'm in the middle where I I just have to know, like, I have to know the beginning, the middle, and the end. And then then I kind of go. And those can change, but I find that 9 times out of 10, like, I was right in the beginning as to what I think the middle and the ending should be. I'm like, no, you were right from the beginning. What are you doing over here? Go back.
Yeah, I think the problem I run into as well is like I'll never know the ending, but I'll know like what the ending can't be, for example. But I won't really know how it resolves. But my problem is if I think about, say like plot twists, which I don't really look at plot twists as like, oh, I got to have a plot twist. I think of it as like, oh, something just occurred to me. That's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that had I been outlining this. And now it elevates my manuscript a little bit. But I never would have thought of those twists or whatever at the beginning. So sometimes I think if I know what I'm writing, then I'm afraid it's going to be a little predictable. So I do kind of like the idea of like, I am just winging it. I sit down every day. I'm like, what happens today? And then it all has to really come alive in the editing. The editing, you have to be very, very honest with yourself and be brutal about it, which is not an easy thing to do, because you have to you can't be lazy about it. You have to really admit to yourself, this is not great. Things have to change, and that's a lot of work, but it's not harder than writing that first draft, I think.
Yeah, no, I don't even know which aspect I like or dislike. I'm like, it's all hard. Like,
it's all hard. Yeah.
Different levels of different aspects of difficulty to it. But I also enjoy, there is like I'm in revision right now, and I am someone who like, I'm someone who like loves moving around the commas, moving around the periods, and like, well, how do I phrase that? Like, beginnings are always so hard for me. I think the other day I spent like 6 hours on an opening chapter, and I'm like, here we are. This is just what openings are. They just take forever for me, at least. They take forever. Right.
And then your editor says like, I think the beginning actually starts here, chapter 3. So we should and they're usually right. They're like, right. Oh, why didn't why didn't I see that? Because you get too close to it sometimes. But you're right, because there's two different types of editing. There's the major kind of plot based or character development editing that really takes some greater holistic thinking about your story as a whole. And then there's the commas, the periods, the word choice. But that's very rhythmic, right? Because you're reading it and you're like, I'm not feeling the rhythm of the tension of the scene. Oh, let me staccato burst some of these sentences. And it's very music to me. It can be very musical, like how the pacing goes and how your writing structure goes. And sometimes that's part of the editing as well. I'm not sure if you find that as well in your writing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that speaks to my background as a dramatic writer, like as a
Yeah.
theater, as an actor, but also like writing for other actors in all different mediums. Like I have to block out every deadline I have, I block out like the week before to just like literally print out the manuscript and read it out loud.
Yeah, which is
And
great. I've never done
yeah.
that, but I've heard that's fantastic.
Oh, I do it for every and anything gets printed and read out loud. Like it's just I don't I know like it's a old it's something that I learned how to do by being a theater actor,
Right.
but it's like there's some aspect to my writing that I really can't describe. I just literally have to hear it. Like I have to hear it.
Yeah.
It's Shakespeare training. Like that's how I learned how to do Shakespeare, just listening to it
Huh.
over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Right. Well, and that's
Until
when
you
you
just literally
catch
hear
all
it.
those
Yeah.
things. And you catch all the typos because
Yeah.
you're reading it. You're not just glossing over it.
Hmm.
But yeah, and you can pick out the rhythm so I might read, like pick out something to do a reading. I asked to do a 5-minute reading. So I pick a passage and I read it for timing, and then I cut it down to make it all fit. And then I realized like I should have just written it like this because it sounds better in this revision. Why didn't I? But you
Yeah.
don't have that in the moment. It's funny. There's this guy, Tim Booth, who's the lead singer of a band, and he just wrote his first novel. And he told me he not only did he read his manuscript out loud in editing, he read it to his editor. He made his editor like sit
Wow.
there. Like I don't want to say he made it. Like I think the editor's like, yeah, that's a great idea. But I'm
Yeah.
like, that's bonkers. How nervous would you be reading your manuscript for whatever 8 hours
No. I,
over a series of sessions to your editor? I'm like, that's horrifying to me. And he's like, his
no.
response was like, he's like, look, I'm a performer. Like, this is important to me that I do it this way. But I'm like, wow, I've never heard of that before. Bonkers.
I don't know if I could tolerate that. I very much just like finish it, think I'm finished, try look over it one more time, then like drop it in her inbox and run away.
Right. 100%. So I'm guessing here, but that your training as a dramatic actor probably was very helpful with dialogue, which I think is one of the more challenging things for a lot of writers. I think for some people it comes a little bit naturally, but for somebody who's used to reading scripts, for example, or writing plays where it's 95% dialogue, did you feel do you feel like that maybe that's one of your strengths, or comes easier to you, or no?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's how I like write scenes. Like I will just write the dialogue first, get through all the talking in the scene, then go back and revision, like, expand and do everything else. But yeah, I hear the characters talking in my head
Yeah.
first. And dialogue is like, I don't know how it you I think I'm very grateful that I spent so many years having to listen to how people talk.
Yeah.
Like that might be the hardest thing to get writers who are mostly working in prose to wrap their heads around, is that yes, well, you may say something this way. This character will not say it that way. They might not
Right.
even say that at all. They might be totally masking whatever emotions are going on with them.
Right.
It's kind of like how I love a teacher pointed out to me a long time ago how she's like, it takes a lot for someone to say I'm sorry, to apologize. It's not that hard. It's not that easy for people to say the words I'm sorry. And if you have
Mhm.
a character who does say I'm sorry very easily, like that's a character trait of theirs.
Of course. Yeah.
And yeah, it's like that. It's things like that where I think when you're working in prose, you're really, really good at the kind of muscular interstitial, like, what are characters really saying to each other? But it's
Yeah.
that extra layer of characterization that can be a little difficult that I'm very grateful that I just kind of do it. Like
Right. Because there's so many levels that if you were to sit and actually think about it as you're writing, you would never get anywhere because it's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you have to
Yeah.
think about the voices, first of all, not sounding similar or too similar to one another, which is incredibly difficult to do. And maybe somebody speaks in a certain way and if you try to represent real speaking, that's usually a mistake too, because if you do it too much, if you were to look at the transcript of this conversation, for example,
Yes.
it wouldn't be engaging to read, because there's a lot of distractions throughout. And not overdoing if somebody's got an accent or trying to do things phonetically, but doing it just enough so the reader understands, but then you're not drowning them in that. It's a lot to deal with. And I think watching TV and movies like that helps me a lot to say, well, how did they do that? Why was that so effective to me? And you start to realize like, oh, because her voice was totally different, but it wasn't overplayed. It's tough to do. So what is your next, cause I know, Jackal came out in 2022.
22. Yes.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
So next up, I have my second novel, One of You. It is
I love that title.
coming. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Titles and I don't know. We have like
Mine are always changed. Like my publisher almost always changes mine, so I don't get too close to my titles.
Yes. I purposefully did not initially title my second book because I'm just like, listen, like, tell me what you think this is called.
Right.
I can't. But this one, if Jackal is dealing with like the large systemic violences that are happening to people, One of You is dealing with like the more intimate violences we do to one another. It's following a Haitian family that's emigrated to America that when the matriarch passes away, of course, all the family secrets start spilling out and threatening their, newly minted lives in this country. And so these two sisters who don't always see eye to eye have to, handle some of the family business for a while.
And this is unrelated to Jackal.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different. It's set in the outer boroughs of New York City, in immigrant communities, a little bit in Manhattan. It's been really it is a lot to work on. It's been a bit, you talk about the novels that are a bit more tricky. This is definitely one that has been incredibly tricky, but I'm rounding the corner on it finally and feeling like I got my feet under me and we're just like getting to the finish line with this one.
Yeah, that's good. It's a lot of work. I mean, it took me, probably 6 novels before I'm like, all right, I think I kind of have a groove where I know how long it's going to take me to write. And even then, like sometimes you get tripped up and one just takes you a crazy amount of time because it's just more challenging for whatever reason. But then you can't let it go. You're like, I got to power through this thing, even if I have no idea how to wrap this book up. So but I think that's also what continues to bring joy to writers is that there's always something new. There's always something new to be learned and there's always a new experience to be had. And I feel like I'm always grateful for that because I'm always surprised by the actual act of writing, even if I don't think I will be.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Erin, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to get to the storytelling part of the show, which you've been probably dying for. This is why it's called Making It Up. I've picked 3 books, mostly at random from my bookshelf. You're going to choose one of those. Oh, I love the look on your face because now that tells me you have no idea what's about to happen.
I have no idea.
Okay, this is great. So we're going to do a very quick impromptu storytelling.
Okay.
It's going to last maybe a couple minutes. You're going to choose one of these books. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that's the first sentence and maybe a 2-minute long short story. So I'll read that sentence. Then you give me whatever's in your head. If sentence or two, then I'll do a sentence or two, and then I'll call it when it turns into a complete shit show, which will happen.
Okay. All right.
So I've got Mindy Mejia's A World of Hurt.
Ooh.
Stu Turton's glare is getting it. The Last Murder at the End of the World.
Mm.
And Kristen Perrin's How to Solve Your Own Murder. So choose one of those books.
I'm feeling How to Solve Your Own Murder. That's
I just read this. Yeah, it's a good book. It's very clever. So give me a page number between 1 and 350.
Okay. 78.
All right. So I'm going to quickly scan 78 and find us a sentence. And okay. So I'm just going to read this and you do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
Or I'm happy to go first too. Just let me know. But I'm going to read the sentence first.
Okay.
As John turned away in quick, angry movements, I could tell that something in his usual calm demeanor was starting to boil over.
Yeah, starting to boil over. And though his anger alarmed me. I was not surprised because the feeling was justified.
The thing about John, however, was that you never knew when that boil over was going to really happen in a way that would leave blood on the ground. It had only happened once before, as far as I knew, in his 30 years of life. But I started to feel sweat on the back of my neck, wondering if this was going to be number 2.
I think I'm just like, I want to say, okay. This isn't the place, I said, trying to cut things off at the head.
It only took a second for me to realize my efforts were unsuccessful. I could tell because I saw him reach inside his coat pocket. I knew what was inside the coat pocket. In fact, I had given it to him, and now he was going to use it against me.
Who would have thought my fandom for the Louisville Slugger would come back to bite me so thoroughly in the ass?
I think we call it there. I love that. It's about to get a good baseball bat beaten.
Yeah, to the face. I've been to the Louisville Slugger Museum. It's a museum of baseball
bats. Do they make bats small enough to put inside your coat pocket?
Yeah, they make you get little mini bats.
That's perfect. Well, Erin, so great to talk to you. Are you going to be at BoucherCon next week by chance, or?
Oh, I'm not. Well, great talking to you too, Carter. I will not be at BoucherCon because since my book is not being published in the original time frame. I'm like, let's just save money on going to conferences and stuff. But I think I already have. Let me not say things I don't know for sure yet, but I already know I'm doing a couple of things in conference season 2025. So.
Oh, good. Well, I will see you at one of those hopefully. And it was great chatting, and best of luck with your new book.
Thank you, and best of luck with anything you're working on. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Enjoy your week. Thanks, Erin.
Great. Bye.
So that's it. That is my conversation with Erin Adams. It was very, like, I loved it. She's got a great energy. She said a few things that I definitely felt like I learned from, and I'm excited to see what she does with her second book, which sounds amazing to me. I strongly suggest you go check her out at her website, which is erineadams.com. And while you're there, you can check out my website at carterwilson.com, where you can check out my newsletter, my events, of course, buy my books, and you can head on over to unboundwriter.com and check out my first 3 online classes, which are now available, my writing retreats, and my one-on-one coaching. So that's it. That is my episode for this week. Another episode will be out just next week. In the meantime, as always, thank you so much for checking out the Making It Up show, and take care.